10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane.
There's no need to fear.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, cause I'm black.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Supa Black, an all-black panel podcasting experience where we talk about all things superhero, past, present, and future. From Marvel and DC to anime, there is no stone we will leave unturned as we take a deep dive into the genre of superpowered individuals and the worlds they inhabit. I am your friendly neighborhood host, Zuri Washington. I use she, her pronouns, and you can follow me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. That's Zuri with a Z, not Suri with an S. I'll leave it to the rest of today's Supa panel to introduce themselves. Take it away.
Hello. My name is Sheridan. My pronouns are she, her, and you can follow me on Instagram at Island Zephyr Cooks if you're interested at all in vegan food that looks delicious.
Oh man, I was hoping it wasn't me next. Hello, my name's Corinne. She, her pronouns. You can find me on Instagram at I am Corinne Scott. 1 R, 2 N's, and an E. Just currently trying to get my hair in some semblance of a look.
That's look with an L-E-W-K.
That's right.
But don't forget to follow the podcast on IG at Supa Black Podcast, or you can follow us on Twitter at Supa Podcast. Now that we are all assembled, let's get started. So today we have a very special guest. He is the editor-in-chief at Lifehacker and host of the award-winning podcast, The Upgrade. His newsletter in The Atlantic, Humans Being, searches for lessons in the most popular movies, books, TV shows, and video games. His new book, Piccolo is Black, a Memoir of Race, Religion, and Pop Culture, debuts later this month and is available for pre-order. You can go to his website. But please welcome Jordan Calhoun. We are so excited to have you here today.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I just finished the book today. I was so busy during like the month of February that when I finally got to it, I was like, okay, we're reading this book. So I just finished it today. And it was wonderful. First of all, kudos to you for putting that together.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of really good. There were some really great turns of phrase in there and just words that I was like, yes, that's yes, please, poetry, write some more to me. So good. But I know we're recording this actually in the order of events that it will happen. So your book is going to come out the 26th, right, of April?
26th of April, yeah, it's going to be right around the corner.
Right around the corner. That's so exciting. Is this your first book in general, right?
Yeah, it is. This is my first rodeo when it comes to publishing a book, which is a weird experience. It's like in the beginning, writing a book, you think that is the main, once I was done with the book, I thought my work was basically done. I felt like I had climbed the mountaintop. I had gone through all of the fun and trauma of writing a memoir. And then I was 49%, not even 50% done with the journey. I was 49% done because the other 51% is doing all of the marketing and all of the conversations about the book, which is fun, but it's a completely different type of thing. It's talking about the book and talking about the experience of it rather than writing the experience. So I'm in the second leg of the adventure right now, and it's been fun.
And we have you here today because you and Corinne know each other. How do you guys know each other? How long have you known each other? Tell me more.
I mean,
our dogs are BFFs.
Yeah.
Oh.
Dog BFFs.
Yep. Lily and Nebula.
What kind of dog is Lily?
Lily's a Weimaraner mix. She looks like a scrawny black lab is what she looks like.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But somebody once said that they were like, who's that dog? And I was like, which one? The black dog. It looks like Batman's dog. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Like Ace. That's funny. I love that.
He's a great dog.
So you're a dog dad, but you were born in Detroit.
Yeah, I was raised in Detroit.
Yeah.
I mean, I was born randomly in Battle Creek, Michigan, but then moved to Detroit when I was a baby. I don't remember any of this. I just remember Detroit. So yeah, grew up in Detroit and lived there. Everything that happens in the book takes place in Michigan up until the afterwards of the book when I go off to college. After I go off to college is when I leave. Well, after college, I leave Michigan, live abroad for a while, end up finding my way to New York and making New York home. But my entire childhood was in Detroit.
Can you speak to the experience? Because I'm a city girl, but I'm from New York City. So I've experienced New York City as a city. What was your experience in growing up in Detroit as a city?
Detroit was, as I describe in the book, especially early on when I was, in second, third, fourth grade, I lived in a poor neighborhood in Detroit, and it's a very black city. All of my friends were black, and there's a very bold dividing line between Detroit and the suburbs.
Yeah.
I mean, popularly, for anyone old enough to have watched the movie 8 Mile, the significance of 8 Mile and the reason it was called 8 Miles because 8 Mile is the dividing line between Detroit and the suburbs of Detroit, where all the white people ran away and started to live. So I grew up in a poor black city, and eventually what happens in the book, what happens in my life is that I end up going to a school in the suburbs and end up being a transplant from this all black city to this place that is largely and predominantly white.
And having to make that adjustment, having to go from, all of my friends sharing generally my same cultural understanding and interest to being around people who
don't share that same cultural understanding and those interests at all, and having to figure out how to adapt and how much of myself do I keep and how much of myself do I, cater to the predominant group that's around me. And as a kid, the challenging thing there is always wanting to make friends and that being really important to you at that age. So that's a lot of the early navigation in the book is me figuring out my place being a transplant from this all black city of Detroit to these suburbs and in the context of religion, which I imagine we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah. What I found interesting when I was reading the book, was in my personal experience, I went to a mostly white school almost from the jump. So to read about your experience and the transplanting later in your life was kind of, I could feel the jarring nature of that transition. Whereas when I was experiencing, I just was in school and I didn't feel the code switching that I had to do because it just came more naturally. I had to do it earlier. So I didn't think about it until I went to college, where I became the token for a lot of people. I was their first black person they'd ever seen.
Wait, are you serious?
Some people knew to a strong extent, because they've seen some black people, but talking to one and knowing one
engaging,
as, a friend, engaging. And this was in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Which
we all went to the same college.
Yes, we did.
which is so funny.
That's why I'm sitting here nodding like, yep.
But I started crying when I read about your experience, because I experienced that jarring nature that you describe in the book when I was 18, 19, which was really hard to contend with, to understand how I was seen by these people and how to play the game as I had to play it. And so I totally felt you on your journey, but I'm not a black man, so that's a completely different experience for you than it is for me. So can you speak a little bit more, tell the audience a little bit more about your background? I know you're Seventh-day Adventist, but what does that mean for those who are not aware of what that means?
Yeah, first off, I'll say I'm glad it made you cry. That sounds mean, but it's such right in this book in a lot of parts. There's a lot of trauma in this book, so I didn't want to carry that weight alone. I'm glad that other people had to carry it as well. I'm glad.
Absolutely.
Jokes aside, I am glad that it was hopefully validating of a lot of people's experiences. One of my favorite things about writing is when that moment as a reader, when you read something where it's like, oh, someone shared that with me that I didn't realize. I thought I was alone in that thing, and I'm actually not alone in that thing. Someone was able to put it into words, and that makes me feel, seen or validated, and my experience being seen and validated. So that's very, very gratifying for me to hear. So I'm sorry that you had those experiences that I had, but I'm really grateful that my experiences hopefully made you feel less alone in yours. I, like you said, was raised Seventh-day Adventist. I am not Seventh-day Adventist anymore, but I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, which is, especially in Michigan, a pretty strict denomination of Christianity where the seventh day is the Sabbath, and it is from Friday night sundown to Saturday evening sundown is the Sabbath, where you don't do secular things. You don't listen to secular music. You don't watch TV. You don't, play sports. You don't do things besides go to church and, have dinner with your family and reflect on all the things that are good and holy until you close out the Sabbath Friday evening.
So that's how I grew up, in a pretty strict Seventh-day Adventist church. And in the beginning, my family wasn't too strict. I mean, we went to church every Sabbath. That was just a normal thing to do. But we weren't too strict in terms of, what you can and can't watch, and like what normal things like a pious Seventh-day Adventist can and can't do. Like my mom, even if she wanted to be that strict, she was a working mom, and my parents had divorced, and she was basically, raising us kids while she was working and in school. So my brother and I got away with watching, whatever we wanted. And there comes a turning point in my life where my family gets a lot more strict, and there's growing up a strict Seventh-day Adventist is, for anyone who grew up, strict evangelical or strict, I don't know, basically almost any religion, where there comes a line between, especially in the entertainment and the media that you consume, where it's like, these things are okay for kids and these things are not okay. And if you grew up in a strict religious family, that line is drawn to block out a lot of things that are very, very popular. So like,
anyone listening to this who grew up in a strict religious family knew that, Pokemon were sort of satanic, and like pocket monsters, not a thing. Harry Potter, no, that's witchcraft. You can do that, right? So there were a lot of things that were, very, very popular, but not okay for kids to consume. And those happened to be the same things that I was absolutely in love with as a kid. I absolutely loved, I was in love with pop culture. Pop culture was my connection to the outside world. And I say outside world as in outside of my Seventh-day Adventist bubble.
Right.
That was my sort of access point to the world around me and the kids around me, especially when I was in Detroit, those kids who didn't have those boundaries on what they could and couldn't watch. So we would connect over Power Rangers, we would connect over Pokemon, we would connect over X-Men comics and, pop culture-y things.
And it was that link to pop culture that helped me when I ended up transferring to a white school and going through these, adventures or misadventures, where my sort of love and addiction to pop culture helped contextualize the experiences that I was going through, because I would link onto those characters that made me feel strong, or that made me feel powerful, or that made me feel seen. And I recognized a lot of my experience in the experience of token Black characters and predominantly non-Black TV shows.
And I described this in the book. There are a lot of characters who are coded Black that, white people weren't really taught to see race in that way. So they're not going to recognize that there are non-white characters or characters who are coded Black or coded a certain way. But for anyone who grew up as, underrepresented in an underrepresented group, I think we all learned to identify those characters that stood out. We recognized, that Skeeter Valentine on Doug, even though he was written like,
full
we all
Negro.
know, it's very obvious. Skeeter is the Black friend, right?
Of course.
He's the Black best friend. So it was seeing myself in those characters that sort of helped me feel like, oh, okay, this is an experience that other people go through, and there are different ways to handle yourself. You could be, you know, the proud character like Piccolo or Martian Manhunter, who, you know, has their own code of honor or sticks to their own culture despite the predominant culture trying to always change them. You can be a character who has a sense of identity and who is able to navigate effectively in a space that wants them to change or doesn't accept them or looks at them differently.
Yeah, I that was one of the first things that that drew me to the storytelling was the title. Like as soon as I read it, I knew exactly what you meant.
Man, that's my favorite thing. The rest of the book could be trash, Zuri. I don't care. 255 pages of pure, unadulterated garbage, and I still be like, that cover is hard. And that title,
it's perfect.
Title is one of those, like, if you know, like,
100%.
It's an inside joke for anybody who gets it. And then for those people who don't get it, it's one of those things that they would, like, you can explain it in 2 seconds. Like, it's not hard to explain race coding in comics or in TV shows or whatever.
But it is something that once you explain it to somebody, and I've explained it to many a white people, once you explain it to somebody, it's one of those things where like, oh yeah, I get, like, it's not hard to understand. It's just that they never had to learn that skill because they were represented everywhere.
Right. Or even if it's not hard to understand, but there are of course going to be detractors or people who say like, well, no, there's no way, or that doesn't make any sense. Or they're not, of course, there's always going to be stupid people. But like for me, the character that I always say is 100% Black is specifically Lex Luthor from Superman the animated series. and I know that's I know that's Clancy Brown in my ears doing the voice acting, but I don't care. That's a Black man. And and what I love, there's so many characters that you mentioned throughout the course of the book. You mentioned Goliath. I just watched Gargoyles. That was one of my pandemic rewatches. Like I watched it when it first came out, of course, but I rewatched it during the pandemic, and I was like, "This is so good!
It's so good. It still holds up.
It holds up. It aged really well. Gargoyles
really well.
It's great. Yeah.
Out of control. I really hope, I don't want them to do anything, but I also just like want them to do something else with the property. I would love for something to happen. I would love for Keith David to just bless my ears with whatever he wants to do.
A little more. And only Keith David, they can't try to do that mess.
No.
Don't try to redo that. It will not work.
His voice is just godly.
So good.
But I think, there's so many people so many characters that you mentioned, and they run the gamut from normal people like Skeeter and Doug to superheroes. I would consider Goliath and the Gargoyles superheroes. And I was wondering, amongst all of those characters and seeking representation for yourself, who was the one you most aligned with? Or align with now, because it might have changed.
That's a good question in terms of who it would align with. Okay, so I mean, the ones who come top of mind are two that I had mentioned earlier, Piccolo and Martian Manhunter.
Of course.
Because those were ones that, not who I feel that I was as a kid, but those who I aspire to be like. And the reason I aspired to be like them is because they were the kinds who had their higher code of honor and who stood very, very proud in who they were, despite everyone trying to change them. That was the aspirational goal. Was I like that in 8th grade or 9th grade or whatever? Absolutely not. That's not who I was. If I am in a predominantly white space now, then that's who I'd like to think that I am now. But that was the goal there. There were different types of Black coded characters. There were, Skeeter was written just to bully Skeeter, for example. Like, Skeeter was not written as a very strong character. He was just sort of there, and they would let him rap every now and then in beatbox just to be like, yeah, by the way, he's Black. Like, he was there as window dressing, but he wasn't there as a strong, proud character. The ones that I liked the most were the ones who ended up being proud or leaders, like someone like Dinobot from Beast Wars, who was just like I'm on par with every other. I'll fight Megatron, I'll fight Optimus, I'll fight whoever, because I am the strong one here, and I have the of ethics, and I know who I am, and I have this sense of pride no matter what the world throws at me. Those are the characters who I found to be most motivational. So I don't know what character I was when I was, in ninth grade. That would
That's a tricky one to answer, but I know which characters I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say that's such a huge thing. And for me, I grew up in predominantly white spaces, except for when I went to church. So it's always been, and that idea of seeing yourself in these characters is so important because you feel like such an outlier in those spaces. You feel like, at least for me, because I didn't have that background of starting in a predominantly Black space, I was constantly in predominantly white spaces. And like I said, except for going to church, and then it was like, hey, all right, we're all here, cool.
Right. Yeah.
And just watching things and feeling less than because you couldn't see yourself. And it just, the way it ate at my own self-esteem, and like feeling like I needed to be a certain way because, well, I'm not seeing this. And I know I didn't see those rooted characters necessarily that I felt like I could identify with. But I need it. Like, I'm so jealous of kids now because they have so much more.
Right? There's so much representation.
So much more.
I mean, it's great watching something like Craig now. Like, there's just see kids being just, happy and not being a token character.
Yep. Not wearing a basketball jersey with a flat top.
Right. Like every Black character was Vince LaSalle from Recess. Like they all had the jersey, the ball, and the flat top, and they would just let them rap every now and then, just be like, in case you forgot. Like everybody would be the Black Ranger. Like every now and then, you got to break dance just to let them know, that you are the urban character in the show,
which has its own problems.
Absolutely. And those were the ones that I didn't want to be that. Like I don't. There is a place for those characters, and that's probably a longer, deeper conversation about the roles those characters play in entertainment and the evolution of portrayals of people of color on TV. But
the character of the Black Ranger, Zach, like that is an example of the token Black that like a lot of us were from time to time, but none of us really want to be. Like you don't want to be the one who's just thrown in for extra flavor, just thrown in like go break dance every now and then, go beatbox for a minute, and that's your role, is to add some color to this otherwise white team. I think I wrote in the book about a ratio that is pretty common when we were growing up, or when I was growing up, of it would generally be 5-1. Like there would be a group of 4 or 5 heroes, and you would have one Black person in the mix. And the only thing that would separate them as the Black person really is that they would throw them in there to be urban every now and then. And they would do something to denote that they are the person, the Black person from the city or something. And that didn't speak to me that much. What spoke to me were the characters who
were written with a lot more thoughtfulness lines, or they were surrounded by a bunch of other characters that I also coded as Black. 2 examples being Transformers Beast Wars, where I was like, they all niggas, like they all Black. Like, Rhinox with his broad nose and his deep voice, Rhinox is Black. Optimus Primal is Black. Like Dinobot is Black. Cheetor is like they were all Black as far as I was concerned. And another one was Gargoyles. I was like, everybody in Gargoyles was Black. Even Hudson, like, oh yeah, you Scottish, and when you turned human, you were white. But I don't know. Once you turned back to a gargoyle, you was Black. You was an old Black man, a wise old Black man with a beard and a sword. Like, you're basically Azim. You're Morgan Freeman from Robin Hood. Like it was cool to be able to see those shows where all the characters were coded Black, and you can see them not of this is a white person or this is a Black person navigating a white space, but you would see the gargoyles, or at least I saw the gargoyles, as like, this is a family of
Mhm.
Black people, like Prince
Mhm.
and the Smiths on Fresh Prince, or Banks,
Thanks.
the Banks
Thanks.
family on Fresh Prince, or the Huxtables or whatever. Like Gargoyles was a Black family, and Elisa was Black, and that was great too. Like
Mhm.
all of seeing them together, and not in the context of, oh, this is them struggling all the time through a group of one person struggling through a group of white people. You get to see them
Mhm.
being together.
Of all the examples, because you were born in what, 84, 85?
85.
85. So you were born in 85, and I'm a 91 baby. And Sheridan, you might be like a year older than me. But
90.
what I found interesting, because you mentioned at some point, you mentioned proud family, and I think I was very lucky in both how my parents are and the media that they showed me, but also the things that were coming out just as I was recognizing a lot of this stuff. Because Gargoyles, I didn't realize until I rewatched Gargoyles recently. I was like, oh, Elisa's Black? What?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah, man.
I didn't realize it. It was not something that I thought about, but now that I know it in my head, as opposed to being like a 5-year-old who's just like, ooh, who's that pretty lady on screen? That's all I
Mhm.
knew when I was
Mhm.
younger. But I came up at just the right time to not feel totally underrepresented. Martian
Mhm.
Manhunter. I'm a big Batman fan, so Batman animated series, Superman animated series, etc., etc. When I saw John Jones and all these various and John Stewart, of course, with
Mhm.
Phil Lamar. I never felt like completely underrepresented. Maybe on a gender level, that's a
Mhm.
whole other conversation, of course. But when it came to like my Blackness, I never thought about it being a void of it. And so to read about that very like particular time in the 80s, early 90s, where they were trying, but like, but in what
It
way?
was
And
a period for sure.
it was a
It
transition
was like,
period.
I don't remember
Yeah.
when Arthur came out, but Brain is Black. His family celebrates Kwanzaa. That's something
Mhm.
I didn't know until I was in college.
There's so many, it's so much easier to code. Easier is not the word. There's a lot of characters that are coded gay. And I think there's a very big difference between characters that are coded gay versus characters that are coded Black or of
Oh, for
color. Because I would assume there's a group of people that would be like, well, they're all outcasts, so how can you tell the difference? I can tell the difference.
Right.
Elsa's coded as gay. She's not coded as Black.
No.
Right.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Elphaba in Wicked specifically is coded
It's coded as
as Black.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, a Black person has never played her. I remembered in the book you talked about, I think it was Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. And
mhm.
about generational curses and trauma, and something about the demon that would stand in your doorway that you saw at night. I've been really intrigued by, and by intrigued I mean like tepidly thinking about, because it makes me sad to think about generational trauma and how that just weighs on you. It's in your bones. I know Watchmen really delved into that. That was a big part of the
series.
Watchmen series. Can you talk a little bit more about what drew you to the Bruce Lee story? Because I thought that part of the book was really like the crux of a lot of what you talk about when it comes to validation and value and trying to find your way through.
Man, absolutely. So on a surface level, something that I just love with Dragon the Bruce Lee story is that it was this weird thing that my brother and I really got into, and it always felt like no one else knew this movie existed, which obviously isn't true, but like my brother and I loved that movie and we would watch it so often and we would refer to it a ton, and it was just one of those things that just felt like ours, and it was, this just cool action martial arts movie that any kid would love. And it wasn't until later on that I understood a lot of the race challenges that are depicted in that movie. So I describe it in the book. There's a conversation with a bright, doe-eyed Bruce Lee who's gonna leave to come to America to become a Hollywood actor, and he's all optimistic. And there's this, grizzled, jaded guy who's with him on this ship to the U.S., basically saying like, they're not going to accept you, dude. Like you think you're going to be this big star, and I understand the optimism, but like, do you know how you're going to be treated? Do you have any idea? And Bruce Lee is like, nah, they haven't met me before. And he's like, yeah, okay. Like, and those type of scenes didn't stand out to me so much as a kid. Those are scenes that resonated when I had a better understanding after I had, gone to a white school and had that experience of being the other and being treated a certain way. That part, the meaning of the movie shifted to me in a really significant way, and that's one reason that I love it. I had one interpretation of it as a kid, and then a completely mature, different understanding of it when I got to rewatch as an adult. And it was just as entertaining and monumental, but I got to see it in a different way. The other thing, though, the thing that resonated to me as a kid was that there was this sense of haunting and evil that followed from generation to generation in Bruce Lee's family. It had haunted his father, and his father didn't defeat it, so it was haunting him. And if Bruce Lee didn't defeat it, then it would haunt Brandon Lee, his son. It would go down generation to generation. And that tied into some of what I was learning in church at the time about iniquities and about sin and about challenges being passed down from the father to the son, and from the son down to their son, and like through generations, if it's not addressed, if it's not overcome. So that was my tie-in to understand, like, oh, this is what I'm learning in church, but this is being seen also in pop culture, in this like thing that is also entertaining me. And it sort of validated what I was learning at the time. And it also scared the shit out of me. Can we curse on this podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't give a shit. So.
Okay. All right. Good.
So yeah, that scared the shit out of me. Because it was the spiritual warfare that I was raised to believe and that had always lived in my imagination, but it was personified in a literal demon that was chasing Bruce Lee throughout his life. And it was and is, I think, just a great illustration of that concept that, Bruce Lee eventually had to face this demon. He had to turn towards it and to fight it and to overcome it, or else he would pass down the same insecurities and the same challenges that he was warned about. He would pass that down to his kid. And I think that that's a powerful, really meaningful message that I really, really love. And in the book, I mean, not to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it yet, but there is a figure in my life who I looked at as that demon, that, challenging things that I personally would not stand up against, until eventually you hopefully do. And
yeah, just an all around great movie, man. 5 stars, highly recommend.
5 stars. What would you say? You speak about the Bruce Lee story and how he has to overcome his own fears in order to battle the demon that has been chasing him. We talk on the show sometimes about what makes a superhero. And I always say, or one of my favorite superheroes, as I've mentioned, is Batman. And I always love Batman because I think he fights a battle every day with himself, as opposed to his rogues gallery is there, but they're a representation of things that he possibly either doesn't like or sees in himself in some way, shape, or form. So he has to fight himself every day and hope that he wins at the end of the day. What do you think makes a superhero good or bad?
I think conviction and bravery to fight for whatever it is you have conviction over. I think that that's probably my easiest go-to definition a hero or a villain, I guess. A hero is someone who has conviction and the bravery to fight for that conviction, and that I, as a reader or a viewer or a listener, agree with and think that that's good. That is a hero for me. A villain is someone who also has conviction. Magneto has a shitload of conviction, right? Like any well-written video, like Thanos has conviction, right? Mm-hmm. Thanos has conviction, and he has the bravery to go after that conviction. The thing that would make him a villain is someone looking at that and saying, oh, I disagree with his ethics on that. I disagree with what he's going about, what he is ultimately trying to do, right? So I think the same thing, the thing that makes someone a character, a powerful character, is that conviction and the bravery to go after what it is they feel strongly about. And the difference between a hero and a villain is just how you feel about if you're aligned or misaligned with their ultimate goals or means to meet that goal, what they are.
Right, because there's a lot of people who would consider, who you will go toe to toe with, who will say Killmonger was the hero, and you're like, oh, okay,
right. Yeah, there are,
and I think that that's a mark of a well-written villain, where there should 100%. Be at least some discussion over whether they were, they were 80% right, but then they got 20% of it wrong. They had these points, but there were certain things about it that made them villainous or that you disagree with, and that's why they were a villain, because someone else, the hero, had a better vision of how to accomplish the greater good that person wanted. It's very rare to have, I think I mentioned this in the book where I did actually. So there are cartoonish villains that are just written as like mustache twisting evil, right? Like a Dr. Robotnik or whatever, like I just want to take over the world, or I just want ultimate power because I am evil. And you cackle and twist your mustache, right? But then there are villains who, I think the person who I wrote this in the context of was David Xanatos from Gargoyles, where he was a villain, but he was the first complex villain that I recalled, because he wasn't just trying to be evil or be powerful or be king or whatever. He, at some point at the end, was just always looking out for his family and himself, and he would do whatever it took to take care of his family, and his priorities would change and his behaviors would change based on I do what I have to do for this main objective that I have in my life, or this main concern that I have. And I think those make the best villains. Those make the best antagonists, are people who have a background story or a goal that is majority right. It's not like they're just this evil person who wants to destroy the world. They're someone who has a background that makes them want certain things, and maybe they've gone a little bit too far, or maybe they're looking at it a slightly wrong way, and there's some debate to be had over whether they're a hero or a villain. And I think it can go both ways as well. There are plenty of people who are heroes that, or considered heroes, or largely seen as heroes, who I'd be like, nah, that motherfucker's a villain. Top of mind example, Wanda Maximoff, evil. She's not a hero to me. Wanda is dead ass a villain in the comics and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is kinder to her and has her as an Avenger and tries to make her more sympathetic. And they effectively they do successfully make her more sympathetic to most people, because I think most people look at her as an Avenger, a hero, a good guy, a good person. But there's debate that can be had on these characters, and I think that's what makes them fun.
What would you say? I know you're not no longer a practicing Seventh-day Adventist, but I'm sure that you remember a lot of what you were taught. My fun question is, who are superheroes in the Bible?
Oh man, Moses, top are alive right there. Moses. Most easily, man. You give me the Prince of Egypt, motherfucker. This dude.
Give me that soundtrack.
This dude went and get I don't know if I consider myself someone with
pretty strong sort of I could be dogmatic on certain things. I could be pretty stubborn. I can have a really strong opinion. Could I go up against my brother? Like, he went up against his brother, the brother he grew up with and loved and went through all these adventures with, and now he's like, nah, man, I was talking to a burning bush. He said, you got to let my people go. And Pharaoh, also stubborn. Pharaoh's like, nah, let my heart be hardened no matter how high the cost may go. Nah, man, that's a battle for the ages. That was, to me, to kid me, at like, I would put Pharaoh versus Moses up there with like Captain America and the Avengers, like going up against Thanos and just running together to meet in the middle. Like that shit is so hard to me. So Moses definitely goes to the top of the list. Yeah, Moses was hard. Who else can I think of? Heroes in the Bible. I loved anyone, for better or worse, I loved anyone who had who was basically willing to face death and be like, I guess I'll die for this then. So David and the Lion's Den, like being willing to go to a pit of lions because you're like, this is, or Daniel and the Lion's Den, I said David.
Daniel being willing to go in the Lion's Den.
To like willing to die, that was hard. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, there's a story in the book about them willing to go into the furnace. That's hard. Like anyone who's willing to be like,
well, guess I'm getting murked today, but you're not changing my mind. I'm like, all right, I respect it.
I was thinking of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because my dad always said Shadrach, Meshach, and that Negro.
Exactly. Yeah, man, they were hard. Nebuchadnezzar was like, man, make the fire 7 times hotter. They were like, the heat of the fire, I'm gonna die anyway. Like the heat of the fire ain't bothering me. I told you we're not gonna kneel. So
anyone who was willing to face death for their conviction, those were the characters who I loved as a kid. Those were the ones who were unflappable. Like they were unshakable, and that was always admirable to me.
I have a fun thing I just thought of. So I'm gonna name a superhero and then just do 3. Can you try to come up with a Bible verse that you think aligns with them?
We'll see. My biblical knowledge. Whew, I don't know if it's not going to be as sharp as it was when
even
very different recesses.
Even if it's a paraphrase, I'm down.
All right.
My mother's a Buddhist. I am not here to just
listen.
clock you.
I'll say we will do this as long as Sheridan is here with me. All right.
Yes.
As long as you got my back.
I am here.
All right. We doing this together.
I can't be helpful in this. I know John 3:16.
Yeah.
I'm going to be paraphrasing.
I feel like between me and Sheridan, we'll be able to come up with something.
It's gonna be paraphrase the hell out of it, but it'll
it won't be King James. It'll be Queen Sheridan.
I'll be your researcher person.
We'll be good. We'll be good. All right.
Okay, we're only doing 3. Okay. Let's see. Oh, let's do Professor X.
Professor X. You know what? For Professor X, what he reminds me of is King Solomon, who, when given a choice of anything he could have in the world, he asked for wisdom. And I can't remember the specific Bible verse in Song of Solomon where it is described, but he could have had anything he wanted. He could have had riches and gold and all that stuff. Eventually came, but he wanted wisdom above all else, and that's what comes to mind when I think of.
I was thinking wisdom too.
X. Yeah. Yep.
I wish everyone could see what Sheridan said.
I know. I'm making hands signals.
She did the eye to eye. She did the Goofy movie eye to eye expression. Like, yeah, I see you.
Yes. Oh, and we're gonna get into that in like 2 seconds. But okay, two more. My next one. Let's pick an Avenger. I don't want to pick one of the stereotypical ones. Oh, I know. T'Challa.
Oh,
T'Challa.
Jesus.
Let me think.
I feel the Jesus
What
vibe,
Bible verse?
but I can't think of a Bible verse.
Man, that's a hard one. Tying in T'Challa to a Bible verse.
I keep thinking of, yea, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
Fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff shall
They
comfort me.
comfort me.
I feel like that's something that like T'Chaka, his dad, would tell him in the spirit world. Like
Exactly.
they would
That's
be
exactly
communing
where I
around
was.
the tree. They would be
That's
communing
exactly where I
around the
was.
tree, talking about how he's with him.
Mm-hmm.
We can go with that.
Great. Okay, last one. Let's see. I'm gonna go DC with this one. Trying to think. I'm like not. I'm trying to think female superhero that's not Wonder Woman, but Wonder Woman's the only one that's popping in my brain right
Hot
now.
girl.
Like,
Yeah, do
that
Hawk
girl.
Girl. That's Hawk Girl. That's what I want.
Which one? Who?
Hawk Girl.
Hawk Girl.
Hawk
Shayera.
Hawk Girl.
Shayera Hole.
All right. So
Mm.
first thing that comes to mind, Hawk Girl, is tying in sort of literally to the flying one is those that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall walk and not be weary. They shall run and not faint. So mounting up with wings as eagles is what comes to mind.
That was good. Good job,
Damn.
guys. I'm proud of you. But I would be remiss to not talk about your brother Daryl. He's such a big part of your storytelling and of your life. And also he's just super. He was so kick-ass. Between Daryl and Carlos, I was like,
yeah, those two, man. Yes.
like
Yes.
those are right. Like those are ride or dies. Do you still talk to Carlos these days?
Yes. He is one of the very few people from the high school that I ended up going to, that I still keep in touch with regularly to this day. Like if I don't get a text message from him today, I will be surprised. He is a great friend and a great person, and very, very proud to have him in my life. Him and my brother both, like, basically.
Carlos was able to take the baton from my brother when I was away from my brother. So my brother was always my rock when we were going through a lot of hardships as a kid. He was the older brother who, would be able to stand up to people in a way that I wanted to, but wasn't ready to at that point. And it wasn't until, I went to this boarding school, this predominantly white boarding school, and had struggles with identity and how I see myself in navigating this white space without my brother, and having someone like Carlos who was proud of who he is and was able to, shed some of that towards me.
Yeah, I really, your relationship really was very moving. Daryl and in your relationship was very moving. And I'm so glad, especially given the experience that you did have in your household growing up, that you had someone that was your own private superhero. Because that's so important. That's important in any context, but especially given because you're a child of divorce and of a stepfather who is not great and some other things, and your mother was going through a lot. And so to have him there, I'm grateful for you that you had a Daryl, and I have a couple Daryls in my life that I should call today just based off of that. So thank you for sharing that piece of yourself with us and with your audience, and for everyone who should go get the book, pre-order it today. But before I let you go, before we truly close this out, I have to mention, for those who do not know, Jordan Calhoun wrote the article about a Goofy movie being the most underrated Black nerd classic of all time, and I'd be stupid to not mention it, because
that article was amazing. I remember sharing it to everybody.
I definitely read it. I read it every time it comes up. So probably I've read it 50 times.
3 times a month.
Because it's so true. Right down to Tevin Campbell.
The funniest thing about that article is when I wrote it, one of my best friends in the world, Omar Holman, I was talking with Omar Holman that night. It was like,
I started writing it one evening, and it was, Omar was about to go to bed. It was like 11 o'clock. And I was like, nah, I'm going to finish this. Nobody's going to read it and nobody's going to care, but I need to get these bars off. I just need I was like, I'm writing this for me at this point. I'm writing this just for me. And that was and it went viral and spread around and validated a lot of what people thought or felt, it touched a lot of people, and that ultimately that was the first step to what became Piccolo is Black. Like, that was the first step in it, because one, it validated for me that a lot of people understand this concept and see it the same way that I saw it, and that it was a universal thing. It wasn't like this, super unique thing to me and my brother. This is something that any Black person who had to navigate a non-Black space had noticed and felt, and non-Black entertainment, noticed and felt, and that it would connect with them. But also it told me that if I can write something that I feel like it's just for me, and the more sort of raw and honest I could be in those stories and in that storytelling, it's sort of counterintuitive. You think that it's just for you, but it becomes accessible to more people, because you are typically a lot less alone than you think in the types of feelings that you have and the types of thoughts you have. It's something that is probably, pretty shared, and your people will find it, hopefully. And you will then feel less alone, and they will feel less alone, and you'll feel a little bit more normal and confident in who you are. And so my book
is, I think you would say, pretty vulnerable, like pretty raw. Like, I put some things out there that the only way that I was able to write them out was to tell myself
that no one's going to read it and that it's just for me. I sort of lied to myself throughout it. Like, no one's going to read this. This is going to be just for me. So I could go ahead and just be honest with myself and treat it like, I just need to write this out for me. And in doing that, hopefully the book is able to connect with a lot of people through my vulnerability. So the small thing that got that ball rolling was that Goofy movie story going completely viral, and me realizing that I might feel alone in a thing, but it's probably not the case. I'm probably not alone in that thing. And if I just write it, and if I trust the reader, and I trust my audience, and I trust, like-minded people, then they'll find me.
And I hope that the experience that comes from all of this, I hope this goes viral too. Yes. And B, I hope that the experience that comes from all of this continues to validate what you have learned about yourself in the writing of this book, and that you are special, and that you are valued, and that your contribution does everything possible to represent. Mm-hmm. And you just you're a cool dude, and it's so nice to meet you. I'm so glad we could have you on today.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you tell everyone where they can find you on these interwebs?
Yeah, easiest place is on Twitter or Instagram. It's the same handle, at Jordan, Jordan, M as in Michael, Calhoun, Calhoun. You can also find me at jordanmcalhoun.com. Everything that is basically that you will ever want to know about me is either on Twitter or my website or Instagram or in my memoir that I hope you read.
And don't forget to pre-order that memoir. It comes out April 26th, but you can pre-order it now. Go to his website, Jordan M. Calhoun. You heard it here. And I would like to thank you all for listening today. Please engage with us at Supa Black Podcast on IG or on Twitter at Supa Podcast. Let us know your thoughts on the book once you read it. Please give Jordan all the love and support that he more than deserves. Kudos again for everything that you put into the space today. Ladies, if you could take me out.
My name is Sheridan. My pronouns are she, her, and you can follow me on Instagram at Island Zephyr Cooks if you're into food that doesn't have animal products in it.
My name is Corinne Scott. Pronouns are she, her. You can find me on Instagram at I am Corinne Scott. Corinne is spelled 1 R, 2 N's, and an E. It's usually just pictures of my dog,
which is a great time. As always, I'm Zuri Washington, she, her pronouns. You can find me on IG at Zuri with the fringe on top. And don't forget, should you need heroes, we've got your back. We fear no topic, we attack. If conversation is what you lack, You'll find it here with Supa Black. Bye. Hey there, this is your current day friendly neighborhood host, and these are the conventions that are on the horizon. Every episode, we will be highlighting upcoming cons in the hopes that some of our listeners out there will be able to attend in person or online. This week, we want to give a shout out to 2. First up is Edinburgh Comic Con, which is taking place from Saturday, April 16th to Sunday, April 17th in Edinburgh, Scotland, at the Edinburgh International Conference Center. For more information, check out www.heroconventions.com. The second con is the Calgary Expo, which is happening in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. You can check that out next weekend from Thursday, April 21st to Sunday, April 24th. Mask up and be safe. Hope to see you there.